Rick Essenberg is on the program from the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. He happens to now somehow be responsible for having the most constitutional set of maps submitted to the Wisconsin State Supreme Court, yet for reasons that are unexplained and will continue to be unexplained by the consultants, were rejected. How about that, Rick? You had the most constitutional maps, but they were rejected because I guess they didn't give Democrats control of the legislature.
Yeah, it's a stealth gerrymander, right?
Stealth
it's a gerrymander that cannot be seen. You know, I like to think that we're good, Vicki, but I don't think that we're like evil criminal geniuses. We're not that good.
Well, what is a stealth gerrymander?
Well, it's not a gerrymander. I mean, the problem here is this guy Grothman is well known for advancing what he calls a majoritarian principle, and he'll deny up and down that he thinks that maps need to be rigged to get proportional results. But it's a lie the way that they test it, like partisan bias. So, although there's a lot of fancy language in the report, a lot of indirection, a lot of fog. Basically, what it comes down to is that he doesn't like our maps because they project a composition of the legislature which is not sufficiently close to the statewide support for Democratic candidates who are running for statewide office. And
okay,
the problem with that.
Basically, he says we need to balance the seats so that our legislature is always 50-50 or whatever, or proportionate to the number of Democrats who vote for Democratic candidates in statewide elections.
Right. And the problem with that is that our Constitution doesn't call for that. And in fact, it describes a way of electing the legislature, which it calls for geographic single-member districts. Whoever gets the most votes wins. That system will not necessarily match the partisan support for statewide candidates. And it particularly won't match it when, as here, the voters of one political party are more heavily geographically concentrated than the others. In a situation like that, which is what we have in Wisconsin, if you draw neutral maps that are contiguous, compact, split the fewest municipalities, and those are the maps that we drew. We didn't know what the partisan outcome was going to be when we drew them. If you do that, then the Republicans will do better in the legislature than they do in statewide races because their voters are more efficiently distributed.
So you are permanently beholden to your physical location in Wisconsin is basically what this guy's saying. You as a Democrat you can't ever be expected to convince people that your ideas are the best. So go into rural Wisconsin, go into suburban Wisconsin, and you convince those people that we should defund police and we should have DEI and CRT and we should have reverse racism. Go convince them that those are good ideas, because those are some of the places that tend to reject some of the leftist ideas, but they don't want to be bothered with that.
Well, they don't, but under our constitutional system, you have to be, because, there are, systems in the world, in democracies, that have this kind of proportional representation, or they allocate, seats in a legislative body based upon, the aggregate vote for each party, at least above a threshold, either in the entire country or in sections of the country. But we don't have that system. We have these single-member districts because American constitutionalism has generally, and democracy has generally been concerned about breadth of support and not simply depth. And so if you want to control the legislature, if you want to control Congress for that matter, you have to, you can't simply hope to run up a majority in densely populated areas that are more concentrated than the other side's voters. At that point, you have to go out and you have to make an appeal to them. And one of the assumptions of a lot of the arguments, in favor of the notion that the maps are gerrymandered or our maps might not be any good, is really predicated on the fact partisan preferences are immutable, and the parties are entitled to win based on whatever position they're taking today.
Yeah, it's card check. It's a form of card check for elections. Basically, is what they're okay. You're a Democrat. You voted in the last election. This is how many Democrats ought to be proportionally representing the legislature. Here's the problem: the interests of Milwaukee are not the same as the interests of Oconomowoc. And the interests of Madison are not the same as the interests of Deerfield. That's the problem. So you're going to subvert the interests of Deerfield and the interests of Oconomowoc and the interests of, Fond du Lac, because the interests of Milwaukee must determine the outcome for everybody else's way of life. That's another way to say what they're trying to say. Let the interests of these densely populated urban areas control the entire legislative process for Wisconsin.
Right. So you have to gerrymander. This theory would continue in order to make up for this geographic advantage that the Republicans have because their voters are not as heavily concentrated. And a lot of people will respond to this by saying, well, you're saying that land votes, or you're violating the principle of one person, one vote. That's not true at all. Everybody gets one vote, but they must be, under our Constitution, they must be placed in geographic districts that are contiguous and compact. And so when you have a bunch of people who live in the same area, who are all voting the same way, their votes will, if you want to use this term, I think it's a little misleading, but their votes are not efficiently distributed. No,
I don't want to use that term because it is completely misleading. It is not about efficiency because that takes the political component out of this. They have deliberately concentrated population in the cities. The Democrats have deliberately chosen this strategy. They have done it. They were fine with it. And now it has bit them in the butt. And now we're stuck with it. And it's not that land votes, but farmers vote, housewives vote, single moms vote. And the interests are different depending on where you are in Wisconsin. What is going on in northern Wisconsin should not be controlled by a population base in Milwaukee, because Milwaukee people keep electing lunatics who want to turn their city into a crime-infested cesspool. So I don't think anybody up north gives a damn what the people in Milwaukee think about their lifestyle. But this map, this guy, by the way, is getting paid $100,000, and they signed a secrecy agreement so we don't even get to see the discussions with the Supreme Court, so that he can tell everyone in Wisconsin, where he's not from, that Milwaukee and Madison should be controlling the political, ideological interests of the entire policy interests of the entire state of Wisconsin. And somehow, though it's not constitutional, those are the maps we should be picking.
Well, right. So in our Constitution assumes, as you, I think, alluded to there, the communities of interest are defined by geography. That's what it calls for. And so there's no legal warrant to rig the maps to make up for this geographic disadvantage that the Democrats might find themselves under. It's not a bug in the system. It's a feature of the system. The communities of interest are defined by these geographic single-member districts. And so this principle that they want to advocate for in this report, and you've got to keep in mind that this is a report. This isn't a decision. This is the opinion of these guys. And while they cloak it in the language of science, and they say from a social science perspective.
Social science is not science.
Perspective.
Yeah. Social science is not science. I was a social science master's candidate. Social science is not science, just FYI.
Right.
Just throwing that out there.
It's none of that, right? It's not scientific. It's not an application of expertise. It's imposition of a particular value system.
Yes.
Now, maybe you agree with that value system, but our Constitution doesn't choose it. Our Constitution chooses something else, and the court must follow the Constitution, so it cannot follow the reports of Groffman and Service. Just want something other than what our Constitution calls for.
Yeah, what they want, and they have no skin in this game. In fact, they have $100,000 to do exactly the opposite of what our Constitution would demand. Again, your map's rejected for being the most constitutional of the maps, because let's flip the middle finger to the Wisconsin Constitution. Who cares about the Wisconsin Constitution? Oh, wait a second. Isn't that what the whole decision was based on in the first place, that somehow the Wisconsin Constitution says you can't have municipal islands? And how, pray tell, does this solve the problem of municipal islands? I want to know, because it looks like Tony Evers' maps, or some of the other ones that draw, Oconomowoc Madison into Oconomowoc, don't respect this whole problem of municipal islands that needs to be solved.
Yeah, I mean, it goes. The problem with the municipal islands thing is that's really turned out to be a Trojan horse.
Of course.
The municipal islands could have been fixed very, very easily. And, a lot of people out there in the public think that, well, the Wisconsin Supreme Court is fixing a partisan gerrymander, but they never found a partisan gerrymander. They didn't even consider that issue. All they found is that there are these municipal islands, and they've always been permitted before, but now after 50 years, we're no longer going to permit them. Well, fine. Then what the court does is it fixes the problem. It doesn't go beyond that. And this report certainly goes, the maps that the court called for really go beyond simply fixing these municipal islands. And this is why we say the simple solution is the right one. But if you're not going to do the simple solution, then you ought to do our maps, because we really set out to draw maps that did the best on traditional redistrict criteria. We succeeded in that. The maps are not as favorable for Republicans as the current map, but they do follow the political geography of the state, and so there is a certain geographic advantage for Republicans in an attempt to maintain legislative control.
Rick Essenberg, I do appreciate you on the program. I appreciate your, ability to contain your comments. I do not share that characteristic, but always thank you.
I've had a lot of practice.
Yeah, because you have to. There's still a court case ongoing. Thank you for jumping on the program today.